This is a Black Nouveau web exclusive.
May is National Mental Health Awareness Month, and we want to talk about how African Americans can practice good mental health. We are joined now by two area mental health experts, Arnitta Holliman and Dr. Kweku Akyirefi, formerly known as Ramel Smith. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
More than 46 million people a year and 1 in 5 Americans experience a mental health condition in a given year. We know this, right? But it's so prevalent, but yet we don't even talk about it. Why is that?
Well, you got to think about it. So many disorders we have are undiagnosed and untreated. And the reason specifically within the African American community, I mean, even if you look at it general, mental health has a stigma attached to it. But when you attach it specifically to the African American community, there's a greater stigma attached. People say, that's not us. That's something that's for them. We're not dealing with this. We have our problems, but we're going to deal with it in a different way. And unfortunately, sometimes it gets to a clinical level and people don't want to deal with it. And then we don't deal with it until it's way past the point of return. And then when people see that, nobody wants to be associated. But I think the main thing what we have to look at now when we talk about mental health, that's an umbrella, it's a spectrum. It goes from wellness to illness. We only talk about the illness. That's not why nobody wants to be associated with it. What we want to do is to illuminate the things, what we can do proactively to keep that good mental health.
But if we're dealing with poor people, right?
Yes, sir.
And we're telling them, we want you to take care of your good mental health and get into that space. How do they find the space to do that when they have limited resources?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I say is this: we have to define what poor is. Because you can be poor financially, but you can be rich in love. And I think that's always the thing that supersedes all of the things that you look at. When you look at our grandparents from back in the day and they had so little, but yet they had so much, we suffer from something called relative deprivation. And that means I'm poor compared to. When we start to look in the aftermath, even when we look about what poverty is, most people don't really experience true poverty. So the first thing what we have to do is really get a whole different thing of what goes into our life, what should make us happy. We're so caught up into materialism. So to your point, we have to define what poorness is. But when you say that to the point, we do have some impoverished things that we have to look at where we can't eat right, where we do have trouble sometimes with housing and those issues. Those are some things for society to determine as a large, but also for the individual to say, when I'm going through these difficult times, how can I maintain with what I do have?
Arnitta, recently Milwaukee County declared racism not a mental health issue, but a public health crisis.
Yes.
I think if you're African American, you probably already knew that.
Yes, sir.
Right.
But when you hear that, what does it make you think of, and how does that play into the whole mental health issue?
Well, I think we have commodified everything, including mental wellness and mental health or mental illness, everything on the spectrum. And so I think it's great that it's been declared a public health issue, but it means nothing if we do nothing and we really don't understand what that means for people of color and their experiences. And so I think it's good. It's just that there has to be more to it than that.
What would you like to see done?
Well, I'd like to see equity across the playing field. So across every section or sector of life. So if you look at all of the systems, whether that's the schools, arts, criminal justice system, in every area, that we're seeing equity. And that means that things are playing out justly for everyone. Also, in school, especially in education, you think about coming up as a youth, I didn't see many teachers that look like me. Mm-hmm. And so that's an early start to looking at myself differently or saying, what's different about me? And so I think those are important things.
Kweku, what are some of the barriers to minorities achieving good mental health?
Well, you know what? I think if we can even kind of go backwards a little bit to answer that,
let's do that.
The answer is reparations. Mm-hmm. We never talk about that. You talk about equity and say, how can we get what we need? And it's not just financial reparations, although that's a part of it. But when you have that level of equity on footing, on solid footing, equal footing ground, now what you do is you have a different disposition with people. They had called something, they had something called hood disease. And that's really nothing but complex trauma, but it was a negative way of saying that whole culture of poverty, like somehow poor people, it was something deficient within inside of them. When you look inside of the DNA of from the diaspora, what you see is somebody who's strong. And if you give them some chances, if we just look to Reconstruction, you see when people are given an adequate chance, the marvelous things they can do. That's what we need. And once you have those reparations, once you have that equitable playing field, you'll see a lot of the mental health issues decease.
Yeah, I think that if I can add to that, I think that it's a great point because we're looking at everything deficit based. So what we don't have, what we didn't get. And so we really need to start to play on the strengths of people in the community. So where are they strong? How do we build on that? And how do we move forward from there?
Great, great. I got to get this question. Is that the reason why politicians are talking about reparations now? If you listen to the politicians, a lot of them are bringing it up. So does mental health play into the part of the reparations?
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at it, that's what's causing a lot of the mental health illness. When we look at America as a whole, slavery is one of those ills that they don't want to talk about. It's a stain on the country that has made us not to be as great as what we can be. And it not comes just from race per se, but also from an income inequality, because you have poor white people who suffer from the same issue. So when we start talking about why are politicians moving towards this, yeah, it's a buzzword that makes them sound good, and because they understand that black women carry the vote, they're trying to gain some favor in that way, but also they understand this: the better one sect is, the better the nation is as a whole. And if we're really going to be able to have this equal footing, we need to make amends for what's been done. And once we do that, we can go from a strength-based approach. We can go to the point where we allow people to maximize their potential instead of looking at the worst inside of them.
What are your thoughts on reparations actually happening, though?
Well, you know what? We've had reparations happen here. We've had reparations happen with our Native American brothers, with those in Japanese internment camps, with those from the Jewish Holocaust. So there's precedent about reparations. And you say, well, what's the likelihood of reparations within the African American community? Well, the fact that we're talking about it, the fact that you see politicians in Congress looking a little brown or looking more gender difference, now you see that there's a different level of hope because people are talking about it. So does that mean it's going to happen in our lifetime? Probably not, but what we have to do is like our ancestors did. We have to live and fight for tomorrow, not only for ourselves, but that our posterity can reap the benefits of what our ancestors have earned.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.